Hey everyone, welcome back to Italian Cinema Night here on the Bad Movie Night channel. And we have returned with an exciting masterpiece, right?
Masterpiece. Yes, most definitely. I can definitely say that now. It was years since I've seen this movie, and going back and watching it again, especially after all the stuff we have been watching, not to say that a lot of things we haven't been watching would be good, but man.
Yeah.
This is good.
So we watched Dario Argento's Deep Red or Profondo Rosso, and it is from 1979.
Yeah, I watched The Hatchet Murders. It's another name for it.
Yeah.
And I know there's a whole bunch of different versions, and I wonder if you have any information about this movie.
I do.
But
it's kind of a mess.
I'm not sure which version I saw, but I think I saw an extended version.
Okay.
And we can get into all that because I do have some issues with that stuff. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
And in the way of versions, from what I understand, I watched the Blue Underground version, which was like a 2012 release or something like that.
Okay.
So there's the US edit and then like the original Italian edit.
Mhm.
And from what I understand, one of the only places you can see the original Italian edit is on the Arrow Blu-ray release.
Do we know which one's longer?
That one should be longer because it contains scenes that were removed and the ending's slightly different. And there were like scenes that were cut out originally because there was some animal cruelty that was like censors thought went too far.
Yeah, that was in this version I saw.
All right, well maybe you saw that version then.
There is a lizard that has a needle through it that's clearly struggling in pain, which was disturbing. But I think I briefly read up on this, but I think there was like a scene where there's arm wrestling, which I did have in my cut.
Yeah, I had that too.
Okay, so I don't know. All right, we can get into it though.
Yeah. So, what is Deep Red about?
What?
I'm glad no one asked.
What is Deep Red about?
So, Deep Red's about, the story opens on a character, the psychic medium, who is brutally murdered. And this musician, Marcus, who is played by David Hemmings, feels a need to solve the case, since he was the one who discovered the body and was kind of a witness to the crime. He ends up working he ends up getting in cahoots with this reporter to kind of solve the crime. And her thing is she wants like a big scoop for her paper of the case. So when one of Marcus's own friends ends up murdered at the hands of the same killer, the pair of them realize that they must work fast to uncover the murderer's identity, or they might end up in the maniac's eyes or next victim.
Yes, it's one of these stories where it's like you have no real reason to be hunting this down except for you were tangentially involved, but he's like going out of his way because it just really interests him. And there's a whole bunch of things happening that isn't really reality, but you're okay because. But there's enough.
It's a fun ride.
It's a fun ride, like the whole psychic thing and stuff like that. It's never explained. It just is what it is.
Yes, very much so.
But I still think there's like some more narrative depth to this movie than a lot of other giallos. At least, I mean, Argento movies a lot of times do have themes, like we've talked about with Tenebrae and stuff like that. But I like that this kind of dives into what makes a serial killer in this world.
Yeah. And they do it well because they spend a lot of time pairing these kind of dream scenes that are supposed to like give you some explanation of the killer, and it's all based around like childhood trauma and childhood memory.
Yes.
And they do a really, really great job at playing up the childhood aspects with like the creepy children's music, the creepy drawings. They really nail it with building the atmosphere of what makes this kind of spooky and scary.
Yeah, it's that juxtaposition which you get sort of at the beginning and then later revealed at the end with like the Christmas scene set up, and it's like looks like happy family time.
Yeah.
Then there's this brutal murder and the blood and everything. It's just, and this young kid. It really works, and it's just, I mean, what really, really works for me in this movie is obviously like Argento's masterful camera work and like sense of style. That is when it's married with the amazing Goblin soundtrack that is just incredibly frenetic and awesome at times. When those two things come together, which doesn't always happen in this movie, I'll say that, but when it does, it's just like it's so beautiful. Amazing. It's so engrossing.
Yeah, and this is the first time he worked with Goblin. He found these guys because he was hanging out at like the music conservatory, and caught them like practicing, and he had been looking for like music, something that was like more modern, and he would have these guys come over to his house in the evening. Every evening at 8 p.m. they would come over and play just concepts for him, and then he would kind of pick and choose what he liked, and that's how you ended up with like the soundtrack to Deep Red.
Well, see, the music is such a character in this movie because it is so in your face and so melodic a lot of times, and it's pumped up so loud in the mix, and it's hard not to just be like, whoa, listen to this. Like, no matter what's going on, you're like, whoa, this music is so intense. Which, like I said, when his camera work or whatever the scene matches that intensity or whatever's going on, it really, really works. But what I found, and maybe this was the director's cut version I saw or whatever, there's sequences where it's like, I'm going to pick at a wall, or I'm going to beat a wall and climb on this wall and stuff like that. And it goes on, and it's only interesting because of the Goblin, not because of what's actually happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of that, I mean, I realized it was just like in its time, but some of that music is like so over the top.
Yeah.
But it's like early synth stuff, so you got to let some of that go. But the music is amazing. Interesting fact, the main score is kind of like this piano thing, so that was massively influential for John Carpenter, and kind of mirrors some of the stuff he did in Halloween with the Halloween score. And also, John Carpenter was extremely impressed with the camera work this movie and used it similar kind of flowing and first-person perspective like in the opening scene of Halloween. That was all from his viewing of Deep Red and a love of like Argento's work.
Yeah, watching this movie, it's hard. If you were into filmmaking or you're a filmmaker, it's hard not to be inspired by what's going on a lot of times in this movie. Like, I went down, after I watched this, I have like a note for a movie I'm working on that I just add like random thoughts to, and I was like, I need to do something like blah 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 blah.
Right?
And because it's so inspiring. Like, it's just so creative.
It's so thought out. Like, there's so much creativity through the whole thing. Like we were talking about the camera work. Like, the way he uses the camera in this, the camera's like always moving around, and it's always flowing. And sometimes it acts as like the killer's perspective, and sometimes it's just like its own character. Like, there's a scene where they're like talking in the street, and the camera just decides to leave the conversation and go down the street and look into this window where the TV's playing. Like, it does so much of that where it just does what it wants to, and because you're so pulled into this movement and like the story it's weaving, it's just like it works so well.
Oh, definitely. And I was thinking from like an editing perspective, some of these scenes, there's a scene where a guy gets brutal, I wouldn't get into murders, but this one scene, this guy gets brutally murdered, his teeth get smashed in, he's like curb stomped against like desks and stuff. And then he gets stabbed. But if you look at the footage, it's like very unique, and he must have had, I wonder if it was storyboarded or not, but the shots are so particular that if you were just like handed this footage, you'd be like, what are we shooting? Like, what is this? Yeah. But the way it's all put together, it all really works.
Yeah, it works. It's thought out. Like,
it's so thought out, yeah.
They talk a lot about Argento uses his own hands and stuff in this movie. and like in a lot of his work as like the killer. But he does it because he says he knows how he wants the movement to be so perfect and he wants to match. He just knows what he wants. So he does the handwork because it needs to work when you go to the editing room, they cut it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's incredibly impressive a lot of times. I also thought the acting by David Hemmings was really good. And actually most of the people, even though the version I saw was completely dubbed, but they all, I assume, were all speaking the words in English, but probably had thick accents or something like that. That's why they dubbed them.
Yeah, I read they dubbed the whole movie.
Okay.
They shot it without audio.
Oh, really? But the mouth looks like it matches up with what they're saying.
They did the classic Italian thing where you speak the language of whatever you want, and then they just dub it. But everyone ended up doing their own dubs, I believe, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. The only one that didn't seem legit was the old lady, like the old lady who was the caretaker or whatever at that place. She seemed like didn't fit to me, but other than that, everybody else matched up. And I thought, like I said, the acting was pretty good in this movie.
Yeah. Well, Dario Nicolai, the reporter, the actress that plays counterpart to our guy, David
Marcus.
Marcus's character. This was one of her first movies with Dario Argento, and they worked so well together and just bonded so well. She ended up becoming his wife, and she also co-wrote Suspiria with Dario Argento and a number of his productions. So she's like a really big influence to him going forward in his progression.
Isn't she in opera or something?
She's in opera. She's in The Card Player. I believe she's in number. She was supposed to be in Suspiria, but she got injured or something before filming, so she was removed. But she's in a lot of his movies.
Man, there's just so many iconic shots of this. When you're talking about her, I think of that shot where she's on the phone and it's just like complete darkness behind her, and the framing is so perfect, and it's just so amazing to look at.
I love the early scene when she storms into the murder scene and she takes her little square rectangle camera, takes a shot, and it's the framing of the rectangular viewfinder in his face.
Yeah.
It's just like really quick. It's just like so cool that they took the time to do something fun like that in the movie.
Yeah. There's like other inspirational moments. The particular scene I'm thinking about is when the doll comes out of the room and it's like animatronic. Like that must have inspired Saul, because Saul has the little jigsaw guy who comes out on the bike, and it just feels like 1-to-1 to me. Maybe it didn't, but I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I thought the same thing.
You have like the hanging doll. I remember that visual as well. Just so many like these scenes that are just like, man.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say. You just kind of blown away when it happens.
So he wrote this story in his grandfather's country house by himself, kind of in exile, for the first segment, and then he paired up with another famous screenwriter who is what's his name here? Bernardo Zapponi. So he ended up co-writing the rest of the movie with him, and they just like they totally focused on common day things that people can relate to and being terrified of, like, you know, like they talk a lot about like someone getting stabbed or shot. A lot of people don't know what that experience is like, but a lot of people know what it's like to bang your head on something or to like burn yourself, like the burning in the bathtub scene.
Yeah.
And it's really smart to focus in on those things that people can connect to and realize the pain of them, because it makes it just more dramatic when you're watching those sequences.
Yeah, they also feel very mean-spirited and brutal.
Yes.
I mean, they're fetishized in this movie in a way that makes them wholly entertaining because it's incredibly violent a lot of times.
Yeah. Even the voyeuristic stuff is like fetishized up too. It's wild.
Yeah, but matched with the sense of style and the creativity to a lot of kills, it all really works. I also like the mystery stuff that we're unfolding here. While a lot of it, I don't know, maybe if I like read through the plot description, it would make sense, but it also feels like maybe it wouldn't. But it doesn't matter when you're in the moment. It's like, oh wow, this is creative. Like that moment where he's in the bathroom with the old lady who's like cleaning up blood around the sink, and she walks out, but she leaves the sink on, which creates steam.
Yeah.
And then he like, oh, what if this guy who died was actually writing something on the wall in the steam? And it's like, oh, that's really creative. We're uncovering this mystery. There's a bunch of moments like that throughout this movie.
It's like you get this excitement when he realizes it. It's fun. He does this interesting thing too in this movie. He does a lot of close-ups, and we were talking about like this kind of voyeurism and like fetishizing. But like for instance, like when the psychic's breaking down in the theater, he does this close-up of her mouth and like spilling out water, and he does so much of that kind of close-up, uncomfortable stuff through this movie.
The eye, putting on makeup around the eye and stuff.
And it's so creative. It works so well, especially in this kind of genre of filmmaking.
Yeah, it's that. There's a lot of great editing in this movie. There's a moment where he's just driving around looking for a house, but it cuts between him in the car looking and stuff. Like, I love the editing during that sequence. There's a sequence where he's like hunting down gardeners to figure out what this plant is, and it's like made up of jump cuts, but it just all really works really well for this thing.
This is also like early reminiscence of like strong female leads that he does later in his movies too. At least with the reporter becoming like a main character and kind of leading. I love these like, I guess we should talk about it because this is probably one of the last movies where we actually have like the humor in his films.
There is humor, yes.
And it's done so well because the acting is so good.
The acting's good enough to pull it off, yes.
Yeah, and there's this great scene where she's like making fun of his like masculinity with the arm wrestling. And it's just like, they do such a good job with the humor as like, it works. I could see, a lot of movies attempt this stuff and it just falls flat.
It's a weird tonal balance here that could really, really take you out of the movie. It didn't for me. Like there's that moment where he's like on the phone in the coffee shop type thing and the guy's doing something with the steamer behind him so he can't hear. And it's like silly.
Yeah.
Which is weird, like against these incredibly brutal murder sequences. But somehow it rides the line enough that it works.
Yeah, or when he gets into the car and like the seat falls down, he gets locked in. They have to keep climbing out of the roof of the car.
Yeah, it's so silly.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take you out of it. One of my favorite moments in the movie is very restrained. There is a scene where it's a wide shot where the Giancarlo or whatever the professor guy was, who was like in the bathroom finding clues to the murderer, and he's talking to the housekeeper lady, and then he leaves, and it's still wide, and the scene goes on, and you hear like a knife or something, and the old lady turns and starts walking towards the camera as it pans away, and then it cuts, and it's like, this is diabolical. Like, we didn't see anything, but with just the way the camera moved and the framing and that little noise, it's like this impending doom, and it's just masterful.
It sets your mind in motion, even though they don't show you. Yeah, it's very smart. It's smart filmmaking. Again, with Dario Argento, in this film we have the musician's character, which he uses this formula in a lot of his other movies, remembers something from the beginning of the movie but can't put his finger on it, just like in like The Bird with the Crystal Plumage and a lot of his other ones. But it revolves around art. He sees the reflection of the killer in the art, but he can't remember it. And they do it well when you watch this movie, because I think a lot of people don't catch it, which is part of the art of it, of seeing her standing there until it comes full circle at the end. But another cool thing about this is he uses actual art influences in this movie. Like when they walk out, he walks out to meet the other pianist player when they're drinking right prior to the murder in that huge in like the downtown area
courtyard thing,
like and they have that diner there, and I was watching this, I was like, this is like that Edward Hopper painting Nighthawks at the Diner, and I looked it up.
I was gonna look it up. Is
it
in that place?
He did it on purpose. He built it to reference the painting. Like he built the whole fucking diner. Yeah. And that was done on purpose because he thought the mood and tone fit. And he later in the movie too, at the end of the film, when our main guy's looking into the reflection of the blood, that's from a Caravaggio painting. So he's literally putting like painting references into this movie, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I love that. I love that reveal of, it's actually, because he thinks there's a painting missing when he goes and looks at the place again with the police. But it turns out, no, he just caught a reflection in the mirror and the killer was actually part of the painting because she was standing there.
Yeah.
So it's super clever. Like those little moments like that throughout the movie are super clever.
Yeah. It's just really good writing. I mean, probably some of the best writing he's done, honestly. You'll find in this movie.
Yeah, but not without its silliness.
Yes.
I mean, Carlo, who we think is at one point the killer,
yeah,
and kind of, not sort of confesses, but not really, runs away, and the police are shooting at him, and he just gets hooked onto a trash truck that's driving by, dragged down the street, and then brutally run over with a car. And it's like, oh my God, it's such happenstance.
It's funny. I feel like Argento requires one of these in every movie. Because in Tenebrae, he does the crazy dog scene that makes sense. In Suspiria, there's the room full of barbed wire, and you're like, what the fuck?
Why is barbed wire?
Yeah, but it's funny because there's always that one scene that's like, this is just like for the violent aspect. There's no sense to it.
There's no sense to it. It's crazy and absurd, but kind of awesome too.
Yeah.
The final kill sequence is really good as well, with her being strung around from her necklace or whatever, being caught in the elevator going down and just ripping her head off.
Oh, she like throws up a little bit. I was just like, oh.
Yep.
Yeah, such a great movie.
I did see a reference to this, and as I read it, it does make sense, but somebody had pointed out like this theme of femininity and evilness, because all the women characters in this movie, except for the reporter, but they're played up as kind of evil. Like you have obviously the mother character who murders her husband. That is the reason she's like this narcissist who has like mental issues, and her husband says you should probably go to the doctor on Christmas Day or whatever, and she murders him. And Carlo, her son, witnesses this as a child, and that's why he is now like this kind of messed up adult who drinks his life away, suffers psychologically from it.
Unfortunately in the movie too, they kind of pair him with someone who's trans as if that's a bad thing. But I guess that's just like some of the timing of this era.
Well, that was weird, because I remembered in Tenebrae, Argento went out of his way to bring in a trans actor.
Yeah, and maybe that's just because he realizes the importance of having people,
representation. Yeah.
It's also problematic, because like, even today we talk about this, like all media, when they tend to feature people who are trans, unfortunately they put them in such a bad lighting and make them like the bad guy, or they have some kind of, it is a problem.
Yeah, there is, it's just sloppiness. It's like, because somebody's trans, they're automatically evil, or like, it's whatever, it's nonsense. But I did think that they were going to use that, because I didn't remember how this movie ended, but I remembered the trans character, and I was like, I remember the sequence where they're putting makeup around their eye and you can't tell who it is. So I thought they were going to try and, do a bait and switch kind of thing, where it was going to be, you think it's a woman, but it's a man, and blah, blah, you know what I mean? But it's not that. But there's this other little girl featured in this movie when he goes to look at this manor, and she is like, she's got some issues going on, where she's like torturing animals, she's saying creepy things. She's kind of portrayed as evil. So I don't know, there's like weird stuff like that, and then they want you to think for a while that the reporter lady might be the killer as well. So it's like this playing up of all these evil women throughout this movie. Although like Marcus, our hero, is like aggressively like shouting at this little kid and like pulling her arm and stuff, and I'm like,
he doesn't have a lot of the best tendencies, or even how he speaks to women or treats them as equals.
No.
He doesn't really at all. He's kind of like a horrible man.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like a sign of the times, like the misogyny is apparent there, and not supposed to be like notable, but because of we know better nowadays that it is kind of notable. So I don't know. It's hard to say whether it's supposed to be like thematically important or just the way things were then. But great movie, great sets and locations. Man, that like the courtyard is incredibly
it's so
awesome.
cool, and the way they frame it, like when he returns later and they're his friend's like walking away and kind of like mumbling off, they do this pullback shot and you see the fountain, and it's just like the movements are so well fitted with what's happening on scene. I love that whole like conversation they have where he's like talking about playing, they both play piano, and he's like, the difference between you and me is I play to survive and you play because you have a love and passion for it. And I was just like, this is good writing for Argento.
Yeah. I love the old mansion that we spend a lot of time in as well. That was a great sequence to discover the hidden room and the body still in there. Like, these are things you've seen in newer movies nowadays, but like at the time, it feels super fresh to me. Maybe it wasn't, but it feels like it would be.
It was good. There's some great scenes. We kind of talked through them a little bit, but like I really like the first scene when he walks through and sees a reflection in the painting. I thought that was shot really well.
Like the initial one near the beginning.
Yeah, when he's like falling in and the killer's in the glass, like and they follow him with like a long shot.
Oh
really? Oh man.
Yeah, so I should go back and watch that.
I remember the very first time I saw that, I was like, was there someone standing there? But it was done awesome. So well that it didn't like stick as like an important fact for me, even though he hints at it a couple of times after the fact.
Yeah. This is why they don't make movies like this nowadays. Yeah. I mean, this movie took 16 weeks to film. Like, if a movie nowadays they're going to spend that much time and money on, that they're going to hold the audience's hand the entire time through this thing. This doesn't, right?
No.
Like,
not
there's
at all.
these little moments that you can miss.
And yeah, you can really miss it from like when he's hopping from scene to scene and following clues. It's very easy to not understand why he went to the next spot. It's definitely one you have to pay attention to like latch on. I like how they played up the bumbling police officer as like an idiot. He's always eating his food and he's always like being a jerk. And like he misinterprets like his information to him when they're when he first meets him. He's like, oh, the killer had a raincoat on. He's like, no, I didn't say that. I just said that someone had a raincoat on that was leaving. And it's just like they play up this whole comedy aspect of the incompetence of the police. And I think that's one of the reasons it moves into him being like the character to uncover the mystery. So yeah, I really enjoy this movie. It is a masterpiece. You should check it out if you haven't. I know a lot of people are fans of Dario Argento. We get a lot of comments on that. I know there's so much in this movie to talk about. We probably missed some things, but feel free to drop some stuff in the comments. We love hearing people's perspective on the movies and even talk about stuff that we missed in these conversations. But yeah, if you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's a masterpiece, and I'm really excited to go into some of his other ones. We talked about we're probably going to watch Suspiria, Inferno, and maybe even the Mother of Tears. So I'm excited. It'll be good.
Yeah, man, this movie it sets the stage. Like this is if you haven't seen Giallo, you see this thing, it's almost perfect. I love it.
All right, guys. Until next time.
Goodbye.